particular lesson. The lesson today is about families, and it is about specifically, since the topic this weekend is about addictions, it's about addicted families. Now, I encourage you to get a copy of these PowerPoints. The first 12 slides talk about the home as God would have it. This is the second part of that lesson, which is the home as God wouldn't have it. And so that's what we're talking about in this section. So feel free to go ahead and use that first part for your own studies. But in addicted families, there is a morph that happens in the families, that what starts out as a family of hope and we're looking at happily ever after and all that. Well, we've got addiction that kicks in there. Addiction in the form of pornography, in the form of substances, gambling, relationship addictions where someone's cheating in the family, or digital addictions, whatever that is. What this does is it throws the family sideways, and it throws the family out of balance, if you would. This lesson is designed to talk about what happens when the family is out of balance, and how can we try to operate a family that is out of sync. That's what this lesson's about. And so the first slide we have up here is when our family is thrown off by things in it that shouldn't be, then a pattern of insanity or adjustment in that family occurs. And we get what we call a lot of dysfunction that's going on. By the way, I've not ever met a functional family. Have you? All of us have things we have to work on in our family life. But this lesson is really about those that have extreme dysfunction. And so we'll talk about that as we progress here. When we introduce various things, well, we didn't talk about tobacco, but that would be another one as well. But the addict or alcoholic becomes dependent on the chemical, but then the family becomes dependent on the addicted person. In other words, the family, instead of following a normal course of everybody's kind of got their role, that the family begins to build around the addiction. Here's how it does that. I wonder if he's coming home drunk tonight. Wonder if they took too many pills today and acting loopy. Wonder what they're doing. They haven't come home at all. And so we build the family around that, whatever it is they're abusing. And it becomes the focus. 1 out of 4 children live in a home where alcohol is used and abused daily. It's 25% of young people. And what that means is they grow up in a home that is surrounded by dysfunction at some level. And they also learn things that they will carry into their childhood, and it has a profound effect upon them. We'll talk about that in just a moment. But the family develops around the addiction simply by learning to cover for the addiction. In other words, if someone comes home drunk, for instance, then what we learn to do is tiptoe around the house. We walk on eggshells, and we probably don't want to bring that subject up. So someone takes off and hides in their room, and they may give themselves to a lot of studies or to some lonely time in their room, or maybe to the digital stuff, and they begin forming their own dependencies. But 1 in 4 children grow up in a home like that. Many times we'll see them either tend to isolate or tend to make all kinds of reasons to get out of the house. It may be the social activities or other stuff, but the family tries to scatter to avoid the center of conflict, which is the addiction, the substance is what I'm talking about in this lesson. These children, though, as they grow up, are at greater risk because the family hasn't functioned as a family needs to around them. They're at greater risk for mental illness, depression, anxiety disorders, mood disorders, health problems, learning difficulties, and then themselves getting into substance abuse or because they're familiar with the substance abuse in the family, choosing someone to marry who is just like the abuser, just like the substance abuser. And so the cycle perpetuates. A long time ago, I kind of struggled a little bit, for a while at least, with the topic of what does it mean, I will visit the sins of the fathers under the third and fourth generation. Now, that's several times in the Bible. And I thought, well, what does that mean? In other words, that God is going to consequence the family? Well, God doesn't necessarily do it, but the addiction does. And what that means is that the result of poor decisions made by one generation can filter down to multiple generations, and God puts the number on there as the third and fourth generation. So when we have an alcoholic home or a drug addicted home, the behaviors and the dysfunction that's in that home pass on to the children. It's not their sin, but they've been raised with that. And as a result, the children may not even use, but they've learned the patterns. They've learned how to be, in some cases, dry drunks. In other words, the pattern of an alcoholic home, although they're not alcoholic. Well, all right. And as this passes on down, now we get a third and a fourth generation. I think maybe that another scenario that might be even more clearly seen is divorce, where we have divorce happens in one generation, and then we have that scattering of the family. And as a result of that, sometimes we get all kinds of maladaptive roles we'll talk about in a moment. And so we get the family kind of messed up at one generational level. And then those children go out and find their partners. And if nothing is corrected, or if nothing is repeated, I should say, then this passes on to another generation and then to another generation. And ultimately, it takes 3 or 4 generations for a family that the children are trying to do the right thing. It takes 3 to 4 generations to work through a divorce. Sin, my friend, has a ripple effect. It does not just affect the sinner, it affects everyone who is in relationship with that person. And it will ripple on down through the years. Now, there's another passage that I like better than what I just said. And what that passage says is that I will reward you because of your father Abraham. That was said to a guy who wasn't a very nice guy, but it was several generations later. And here's what I want us to see. The things that you and I are doing today in our families have an effect on the success or the failure of our children and our children's children after us. That's the ripple effect. That's also the power of the family as a unit to influence one another for good or for bad. Because of your father Abraham, I'm going to do this to you. Not because you're a great guy, but because of your father Abraham. Or we're going to pass the consequences of these sins even on to the third and fourth generation. Your family is going to struggle because you made a decision that was an improper decision back here. That tells me families have the consequences, not the guilt, but the consequences of things done earlier in the family. When recovery comes in, when people try to get their act back together, sometimes the damage is done and it will continue. Your sins will find you out. But sometimes we can pull this back and we can impact that or influence that in some ways. Some people in the family may go off on a bad path because we taught them how to do that. Others may be able to pull it back and realize that wasn't such a great idea. And so we take the family into recovery. The addicted one, in an addicted family, the addicted one becomes the center or the focus of the family. And their use of the substance becomes the focus. But I want to suggest that in my working with addicted families, that often the one who is identified as the sick one or as the one with the problem that that's not the only one. And sometimes the one labeled as the sickest is actually the healthiest. And that's because families, as they morph, can get more and more dysfunctional. We'll talk about that. The family then becomes a family of secrets. And the secrets that are in this closed family, closed system, are don't talk, don't trust, don't tell. And while those rules may not be spoken outwardly, they certainly are enforced inwardly. And there's no outlet if that is what's going on here. So as a result, we have the family hides their secrets, hides their sins. They're a family of facades, or a family basically that has been taught to just kind of shut up and move on. Now, the way that looks is things go in the home, and we try to hide what is happening at home. Now, here's what I want us to hear very clearly. That if we are not a Christian in our homes, we may not be a Christian at all. Christianity doesn't stop when we leave a church building or when we get out of the sight of our church members. Christianity is to be congruent. And that means anywhere and everywhere we are, this is who we are. We're Christians. So going home and hitting the bottle, or going home and cussing and fussing and doing all kinds of things out of character for a Christian, that isn't what Christians do. We're not one person in our home and another person when we're out in public putting on the show. Well, in an alcoholic home, that is what happens. And what happens behind closed doors often is some pretty nasty and pretty serious stuff. And when it happens, the family is a family of secrets. Don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. Let's hide this until finally the secrets come out and everything pops. And sometimes folks are really surprised. Well, I had no idea that was going on in their family. Why? Because they hid it so well. They were a family of secrets. Don't wait until, if you have a problem in your family, don't wait until it gets so big that it'll take Solomon to resurrect from the dead to come solve it. If you have problems in your families, then you need to address those. We are only as sick as the secrets we keep. And when we sit on this stuff, it does things to us. It does things to this alcoholic or addicted family as well. Well, insanity surrounds the addicted person. I had one family in treatment, fairly wealthy and influential family. And I was talking to the husband and wife, and they had two little girls. And I told them, said, you really need to not only do this for yourself, but you need to watch what you're doing around those kids. And the father, who was the alcoholic, he said, well, my kids don't even know I drink. Like, oh, okay. He said, I'll wait till they go to bed, and then that's when I start drinking. And you drink till you passed out. So I said, well, why don't we invite those girls in this session? They were out in the lobby. And so we did. And so I asked them. The littlest one's name was Michelle. She was 4 years old. And I started out just kind of, hi, Michelle, I'm Art, and so forth. And tell me about your daddy. What's that like at home? And you know what she did? She looked at me straighter than any adult has ever looked at me. And she said, which daddy? Drunk daddy or real daddy? Wow. That little kid knew. And so the answer was, tell me about both of them. And then she told us about daddy's drinking that she didn't know, according to dad. You see, even though things are not necessarily said verbally in a family, we have other ways of picking up those signals that something's not right. By the way, the wife ended up writing and the husband too, a goodbye letter to Miss Smirnoff. And it was quite an interesting letter. Goodbye to Miss whatever. Okay. But here's what happens in the addicted homes. A person who's an addict, who's serious about it, and who is hung up in it, this person's going to hide their stashes. In other words, they're going to have some in case they run out. It'll be hidden under the wheel well or up over the vent in the garage or various places. Or if it happens to be a drug of some sort, some families have found them stuck in the light switches in their house and up in the light fixtures up above. And some of them even got creative enough to stick them in the linings of their coat. And a couple of them, we used to do searches on when we'd have people in inpatient. They'd stick them in the toes of their shoes. Well, I don't like sticking my hand down somebody's shoes, but they'd stick it in the toe of their shoe, have a little compartment down there with their stash and all. Drug addicts and alcoholics are pretty good at hiding their stashes. But that sneakiness comes out in other ways in the family. Sneaking, hiding. The question, well, where is he? Where is she? They should have been home hours ago. Where are they? Well, are they laying out in a ditch somewhere? Are they in jail? Where are they? And maybe find out that they went to happy hour at 5 o'clock and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and they're still trying to get happy. By the way, alcohol won't make you happy. All right, so where are they? And then in the home, the family they're preoccupied. When the person's home, what are they doing? And what kind of mood are they in? And when they're away from home, we're wondering where they are and are they safe? Whether home or away, we still have the same issue. And then ultimately, the feelings for the alcoholic and for the family is feelings of guilt and shame and unworthiness and feelings that the family isn't up to standard. That's what people are hiding when we talk about the secrets in the family. Isolation and withdrawal from that which is familiar. Family members begin reacting or react with withdrawal, being preoccupied. You can tell something's on their mind, but they're not talking about it. Avoiding home, the blues, irritability, denial. Sometimes they will increase their religiosity. They may say, well, we need to start going to church. That's their solution. And that's a good solution, but there's more to it than going. Sitting on a lily pad in a pond doesn't make you a frog, and going to church doesn't make you a Christian. And so there's an emotional emptiness that happens, and often financial uncertainty because we're having trouble keeping our job. The enabler in the family is one that is going to cover for the individual, and they're the one that if someone is in jail or there's a problem, they will call in work for them. They'll call them off sick. They will do something to soften the blow that is happening with that individual. Now, during periods of sobriety, most addicted persons are extremely remorseful. I'm sorry. I won't ever do it. I call that the honeymoon phase. They're sorry. I won't ever do it again. And they'll look you right square in the eye and talk about how it's over. That's the last time, And I used to think that they were all liars. But I've changed my view on that. I've had people look me in the eye and said the same thing. It's over. It's done. I'm past this. And I kind of concluded that maybe they're not lying to me. Maybe they just have the inability to follow through. And so I started kind of working with some of them, at least, on that. All right. But when there is alcohol or drugs in the home, there's a secret that no one wants to talk about. I call that the elephant in the room. And we're not going to talk about that because to talk about that will start a small war and conflict all over the place. Well, there's some maladaptive roles that develop in this, And one of those we talked about as the enabler. And often that's the wife or the mother. And this is the person that basically covers up for the alcoholic or drug addict. And they cover up by making excuses, by basically trying to take away the consequence of the addiction by covering for them. And as they do that, that ends up being significant problem because when we take away the pain of their addiction, we encourage them to stay in their addiction. Those who are alcoholics or drug addicts need to feel the logical and natural consequences of their behavior. That's a sad statement. But I've had people that will tell me, you know, Art, one of the best things ever happened to me is when I spent time in jail. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I don't want to spend time in jail. That'd be one of the worst things that happened to me, I think. But what they will tell me is that jail time gave them time to think about what they were doing. Now, here's what happens with the enabler. The enabler comes along and says, oh, we can't leave them in jail. You know, I've seen all kinds of things on the TV about things that happen in jail. We got to get them out. So we run around getting bond money to bond them out. And so the person's in jail maybe for just a short period of time, and we go bond them out. Where's the consequence? Where's the consequence to the behavior? The enabler has removed it. So usually what I will tell people is, if they're in jail, the message is you got yourself there, you can get yourself out. Won't hurt you to sit there. The superhero is one that tries to make up for the shame of the family by being maybe the top athlete, or at least making the news. The superhero may be the one that does a lot of extra study and makes the top grades, but their role in the family is trying to help the family to get past the shame of the addiction. See how it's built around the addiction? Not all people that do that are in alcoholic families. And the mascot is the pet of the family. Usually it's the youngest one. And this is the one that we just kind of want to baby them and kind of move them along. But all of these are attempts to kind of hide, to make up for that addiction that's going on in the family. And then ultimately we'll have a James Dean in here who comes along and he's the rebel of the family. He's given up on the family. I don't care. You know, we got problems in this family. We're not a very good family, and who cares? And I don't have rules, and I won't follow rules, and that's your rebel. And you'll find someone like that in this mix usually. All right. Did you know that when it comes to addictions, that we can literally love our family member to death? And by that, I mean we can cover for them so much to where they have no motivation to quit, no incentive whatsoever. We've taken away the consequence of their addiction. And we find out that they have come to need us. Sometimes people will put their family member above their relationship to God. Now, this passage here in Matthew chapter 10 says, the one that loves mother or father, son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. So what that means, I believe, as we apply it to addiction, is sometimes we have to stand out of the way in order to stand in God's way. And that's a hard one. Talked to a family fairly recently that the guy is almost 40 years old and still living with mama, and mama's still covering for him. He's wrecked the car several times in this year, and she puts it in the shop and gets it fixed. I would kind of think that maybe what you do is you tell him, you're not driving my car anymore. But then here's what mama says. Well, if I do that, he won't be able to go out and find a job. Well, he didn't use the car for a job. He used it to go down to the beer joint. But see what we're talking about? We got mama being too much of a mama, and mama actually helping that guy to stay in his problems. And guess what? He lives at home. He wrecks mom's car. He doesn't pay rent. He doesn't supply food. And mom goes bails him out of jail every time he's in jail. Guess what? If that continues, he will not get better, most likely. Well, did you know we can become partakers in other people's sins? Paul talked about lay hands suddenly on no man, neither be partaker in other men's sins. Well, how do you do that? There's several ways we can do that. Covering for them is one. Lying for them is another. If they're too hungover to go to work, calling in and saying they're sick or they got the flu, that may not be the truth. Didn't sound quite like the truth. All right, but just covering up for them. We can become partakers or participants in their sin, even though we're not doing what they're doing. And then sometimes in the addicted family, we get the church needing to take a stance with someone who's addicted, and we may need to make announcements for people to help and to encourage this individual, or we may need to, maybe we've gone the distance and we basically need to recognize that person's no longer a member here. We may withdraw fellowship from them. There may be a letter of withdrawal that is read, and sometimes people get hot as a firecracker when you're out here talking about their family member as the church, while we're trying to keep the church pure and trying to bring the sinner back, even by taking the extreme measure of withdrawal of fellowship, and the family comes in here and they're mad as hornets. When actually what the church needs is for the family to take a stand and say, we don't want them to be lost either. And so we join with you in that action, that we're not going to support that. We're not going to encourage him. In other words, what we're going to do in our home is take the stance, you're welcome here, but your alcohol's not. You're welcome here, but your drugs aren't welcome here. You're welcome here, but the people that help you to stay sick, they're not welcome here. If you're going to live here, if you're going to be here with us, then you need to change your people, your places, and your things if you're going to be a part of us. Otherwise, we're not a part of that. We will always love you. We will help you to get well. We will help you get better, but we will not help you stay sick. So the family has to evaluate, what are we doing that is supporting this addictive action? And the family needs to be strong enough to do that. When I work with an interventionist, Bruce is his name, what he does is he gets with the family, and I've already worked with him usually, and he comes in, and what he's trying to do is to get the family on the same page to confront the addict or the alcoholic all at the same time. And when these families get together, Bruce and I will consult before, and what he'll tell me is, here's the weak link. Here's the weak link. It could be anybody in the family. But when we identify where the weak link is the person that when you're trying to get the addict or alcoholic to make a change, the weak link is the one that will try to soften it to where, now we're not out to hurt you, honey, and so forth. Well, that's a given. But what they'll do is try to soften it. So once we identify the weak link, now we try to fortify the rest of the family to support not just the addict, but to support that person with a weak link that doesn't have the courage to stand up to the addict or alcoholic. Sometimes when we do interventions, we get people that they've got a lot of feelings about all this alcohol and drug stuff that's been brought into their family. We were doing one intervention with a man and his family, and we usually have them write a letter to the person and to read it right there. Take your notes and read this letter. And this one guy wrote a letter and said, you know, ever since you started using drugs and alcohol, I've just come to hate you. I can't even stand the side of your, it's like, whoa. Bob, really, what about Bob? But Bob, no, that's not the letter. And so we did a little coaching. And here's the letter he ended up with. To his daughter. The first time I held you in my arms and looked at you, I fell in love with you instantly. I've watched you grow and develop. We've played. We've tried to have a good family life. And somehow the alcohol and the drugs came in. They robbed us. And I want my daughter back. That's the letter. That's the message. I don't hate you. I get mad at you. I don't hate you. But I hate what Satan has done to you. And Satan's not going to keep my daughter. Satan will not take my family member. Because my battle is not against that person. My battle is against the devil. Against the principalities and the powers in those spiritual places. That's where the battle is. And you're not going to have my kid. You're not going to have my wife. You're not going to have my husband. You're not going to have the people I care about and love. I will fight for them. That's the battle. I will fight for them, but I will not fight on the side of the devil who's trying to keep them. So I will stand with what's right, even if I have to stand against my family. I cannot block those attempts. Sometimes the person in this family will lie for their family member, covering up for them, blaming on somebody else, paying their debt, trying to bail them out, pay their rent. All the while that we're paying their bills, they're paying their dealer. Make alibis, a whole bunch of things here, and then go and clean up their messes. In the addicted family, each family member needs to look at not just the addict or the alcoholic, but they need to ask the question, what's on my side of the street that I need to fix? We spend so much time focusing on the one that has identified it has the problem that we don't see that we have gotten pulled in, morphed into something to where we're also in need of some help. That's why we have groups like Al-Anon. That's for the family members. Al-Teen, Al-Tot. Those are recovery groups that is recognized by those that don't even affiliate with the church, that the family is drastically affected by this. I wonder sometimes when I deal with these groups, the support groups in the community, it's like, why on earth isn't that happening in the church? Why do we have to go to the world to find support and solutions? I just think something really wrong there. There's ways we can do this. And there's boundaries and restrictions on how not to do it. But we need to be there for each other. Churches are not intended to be just organizations where we come and we sit and we learn and we learn and we learn and we learn. I'm not knocking that at all. I think we need that. But we have to go beyond that. We have to be people that are there to support and to encourage, to help one another, to be there when we say, how can I help you? We really want to know the answer. And it may be that we just don't connect with that particular lifestyle. So we may not know how to help them. But we can find those who can help them. Maybe the best way that we can help someone is to refer them to the person who can help them. Someone who can help them through that. That may not be me. That may not be you. But let's help them. Let's not just leave them out there helpless if they're needing help. And so I encourage our brethren to know where those places are. Know who those people are. But more so, what I find in congregations is we have people in our audiences who have the ability to help in these situations, but they're like one sister And I'll tell you about her. This lady came to service. She was there all the time. She taught Bible classes. She did all kinds of powerful stuff. She was kind of known as being one of the more faithful ones. And there was a young woman that kept coming forward in the congregation where I was. And she would come forward just all the time. And more often than not, she'd come forward with tears. And she would say, I stumbled again. I need folks to pray for me. She had a lot going on in her life. And she was asking for prayers. And one night after she had come forward and we'd prayed with her and everybody kind of huddled around her, on her way out, she said, Art, I'm not coming back. And I thought, well, what a strange thing. I said, well, why? And she said, Art, I'm the only sinner here. And I said, well, what makes you think you're the only sinner here? She said, I'm the only one that comes asking for prayers. I said, hold tight. So I went and talked to this other lady who other people looked up to. I happen to have known her background. And I told her, I said, Sister Tammy needs your help. You see, Sister Tammy was a biker babe. She had been with most of the motorcycle guys. She loved to drink at one point in her life. But she was settled out and she was trying to be a good Christian. She really was. Well, what I knew, this other gal had been there too. She had the same background. And I said, can I get you to talk to Tammy on a level that will help her to understand and encourage her? And she looked me square in the eye and she said, absolutely not. I said, can you explain why not? She said, I don't want anybody to know about my past. We talked to her a little bit. And finally, she agreed to do it. She and Tammy became best friends. They had a lot in common. And ultimately, Tammy continued to get her life together. And this other person began to grow past the facade of being the perfect Christian. Because there was a crack in her armor. She had gone down a path that she had learned many things that the average person couldn't understand. And I want to tell you what, I don't care what your background is, it doesn't matter. But wherever you've been, God, during the time of your waywardness, God has equipped you to be a helper to someone like Tammy. But you got to share your story. Why in the world do we have 3 times in one book? If I was writing a book, I wouldn't say the same thing 3 times. Book of Acts, chapter 9, 22, and 26, whatever. Anyway, the book of Acts. 3 times in there, we have the story of Saul of Tarsus, all of his badness, and 3 times the same story is told. Why is the same story told 3 times? Because there's power in the story. That's why. And there is power in your story. Young people, you've gone through struggles too. I don't know you. Well, maybe a couple of you over dinner. But I know you've gone through struggles. And there is someone right behind you that's going through those same struggles and doesn't know how to navigate it. You can be a help to them. You can talk with them about how you overcame, how you're dealing, what you're struggling with. You share your story in recovery groups. For those that have addicted issues, those recovery groups, they share their stories. First time that I attended one of those open meetings, I sat there almost aghast as to these people are telling all their past with all the ugliness and the shame, and they are here to get help. They're not telling it to impress. They're telling it because I need help. In our congregations, we are people that need help. And we are also people who can give help if we don't sit on our stories, if we share our stories, not to glory, not to glorify sin, but to help the sinner who is in the path behind us. And perhaps the height of selfishness is when I've walked down a path and God has taught me lessons and I refuse to share them with others. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Praying in our families means that we remember that our battle is with Satan. In our work with addicts, what we need to remember that the first thing is safety. That is, we don't want somebody laying out in the ditch or laying out in the road or doing crazy stuff. So we got to keep them safe. Okay. But the addict or alcoholic also needs to experience their own logical and natural conclusions to the lifestyle they've chosen. And when their sins find them out, then they will come to themselves. Does that happen? Yes, it does. But it doesn't happen when people cover it up, make it convenient for them. The way of the transgressor is hard. And it's not ours to make it soft. It's ours to help them get back up. Now, in addiction recovery, sometimes people will fall down, they will relapse. And when they do, we don't go kick them in the teeth. We don't go out and say, I knew they couldn't make it. What we do is we go and we help them up. That's what we do with sinners. Knowing that one day I might be down too. And I need people to help me up. You ever been there? You ever been there? Tell you what, I'm going to leave the PowerPoints. But we have a battle raging in our country, within our state, within this town, within our churches, within our homes. It's a battle for souls. It's a battle for yours, your husband, your wife, your children. It's a war. And wars are bloody. And wars have casualties. I have seen homes to where when the focus is around the addict or the alcoholic, that they neglect some of the others. As sad as it is to say, sometimes we may need to sacrifice one family member in order to save the rest. I talked to some of these folks, and it's like, well, when did you start using? Well, my brother, my sister, somebody in the family taught them how to use. And maybe they got a worse problem than their brother or sister. And perhaps that may be because in trying to save one, we ended up corrupting the whole family. You're welcome here. My house, my rules. Your addiction, your drugs, they're not welcome here. We didn't build this house to be a dope den. We didn't build it to be a place that you come and drink. We didn't build it for you just to make a flop house out of it. Here's why we did this. That's about the family taking leadership role for the family. The worst thing could happen may not be for someone in our family to leave the family. That may be something that they may need to do in order to find another way. The prodigal son did that. He thought he had a better way. Sometimes people and families are headstrong, and they want to go out and do their own thing, their own way. And unfortunately, sometimes you need to let them go. But I'll tell you one thing the prodigal son didn't forget. He didn't forget where home was. I'll tell you something else the prodigal father didn't do. He didn't run over to a foreign country and chase him down and beg him to come home and compromise with him. Here's home. And the boy knew where home was. He knew where his anchor was. And that's where he came back. Yeah, there's a battle raging. There's a lot of casualties, and there are also victories. And I pray for you and ask you to pray for me that Jesus Christ is King of our lives, knowing that he will give us all victory after our battles. Maybe you're here as a Christian this morning and you're struggling with some of the things we've talked about, or perhaps other things. And you may need to come this morning and say, listen, I need your prayers. I need your help. I need your encouragement. I need to acknowledge this is going on. I need help. And not be ashamed, knowing that we're here to help you, to encourage you, to be a support to you, and to have resources for you. And maybe you need to come this morning while we sing this and do that. Or perhaps there's someone here that says, I'm tired of walking in the way of the transgressor. It's hard. And I want my sins forgiven, all this stuff, this baggage I've been carrying. I want all that gone. And guess what? It can happen right now. And you can leave this building with all that off of you because Jesus is in you. Would you come this morning and be baptized into Christ? Would you come this morning and acknowledge something that is weighing heavy on your soul and let us pray with you? Would you come if you're just wounded and say, I don't know what to do? Can I use your brains to help me figure out what to do? If you would come to that, then I'm inviting you to come up front right now while we stand and sing.